There are no absolutes in my book. You can, in one phase of your child's life, be a friend. In another phase, you could be a sister. In another phase, if you're a dad, you could be a brother. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what you sort of adapt yourself to be to your child, depending on what's going on. Ultimately, you are the parent. Hello everyone and welcome back. How have you been? Where have I been? I've been doing okay. I've been busy with my life. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Ngozi. I talk about anything relating to family. I am a mother of 3 children and I am a wife of 20 years. So yes, I'm always going on about things relating to family and any topic that affects us as families. Yes. Today I'm talking about teenagers, being a parent to teenagers. I'm not here to tell you how to raise your teenager. Absolutely not. Every single child is an individual in this world and they have different needs, different requirements, different genes, different, backgrounds, and so there is no formula. However, I just wanted to talk about what I have learned being a parent to teenagers. I have an 18-year-old daughter heading off to university in a couple of months. I have a 16-year-old son who is doing his A-levels. I also have an 11-year-old, and that's her birthday today, actually. What happens is we don't celebrate their birthday on the day if it's not on the weekend. So we wait for the weekend and we celebrate them. Basically, the weekend is their birthday, both days. And my little girl said to me this morning, oh well, that includes Monday because Monday is a bank holiday as well. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, that's 3 days of celebration for you. So it's her birthday. She's 11-year-old. Those are my 3 kids and I'm done. Okay, so that's interesting to think that I had a child 11 years ago. Interesting. So back to the teenage topic. I have my daughter and my son, they're teenagers, and I just wanted to talk about what I have learned being a mum to teenagers. It has become clear to me that the most important time of your parenting life would be when you are parenting teenagers. You can say, well, what about the infant stage and the toddler phase and so on and so forth. Every stage is very important, but what I mean in terms of how important it is as a phase of parenting for you, parenting teenagers, is that that's when they are able to keep record of how you talk to them, how you deal with them when they're having some complications in their life. They remember the things you say, they remember where you take them to, they remember the gift you bought them. Everything that you do can be documented. When they are a toddler, a baby, you go about doing everything you can. You buy them Gucci shoes, you buy them Versace bows, and you do everything to make them look absolutely amazing and fantastic. And I tell you what, you are impressing yourself and perhaps people who are looking at you and judging you, maybe relatives, in-laws, family, and you want to prove a point. So you're just impressing yourself and those who are watching you, and that's the fact, because your child doesn't remember those details. Your child doesn't remember how expensive that shoe was. Your child doesn't remember how clean and spotless the house was and all the hard work you had to put in to making sure you ran the family from morning till evening, and ran the house from morning till evening, and made sure everyone had what they needed and they were tucked in bed, bathed in the morning, bathed in the evening, their hair was groomed nicely, and so on and so forth. They don't keep record of all those things. They won't remember. Say up to the age of 9 and 10 maybe, they start to remember little things, and that's when they start becoming preteens. Yes, and we move to that stage of preteens and the teenage phase. That's when you have a clear patch of parenting that your children will be able to document in their memory. And then after 18 years old, when they're heading out, you don't have as much one-on-one dealing with your child as you would when they've left. So my child, for instance, is heading off to university. She's going to be living at the university, so for long stretches of time I'm not going to see her. Basically, that's it. That's when you say they've left the nest. So whatever you have done between the preteen phase and that phase, that's the most important parenting time of your life with that child. And that's the same case for my son as well, who's doing his A-levels very soon as well, a couple more years, and he's gone. So I always say now that that's the most important time. You might find that after putting all that effort into raising them as little babies and making sure they look perfect and the right bows, and you wasted so much of your time, so much of your money, so much of your energy in that phase, and come the phase where it's going to go on record, you're exhausted, you're tired, you're preoccupied. Perhaps you think to yourself, I'm now back on track with my career, I'm now busy, and so on and so forth. And your child doesn't really record what happened prior to that time, and they're just going to give feedback on what's happening now. So now that I am aware of this, it's made me more present and more aware of what's going on, and I have to stop thinking that surely everything I have done over the last X amount of years, is understood and seen and realized. No, it's just about from 12, 13 that it starts to register. Prior to that, the memory of your child would only center around pretty traumatic events or very exciting events. I don't know, like Santa Claus literally came down the chimney, something like that. Your child will remember that. But from that preteen phase to 18, that's your most hands-on. That's exactly what's going to be accounted for, okay? Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that I have heard it said by a couple of people that you can't be a friend to your child. I disagree. Now, I'm not saying that I'm friends with my children. My point is, there are no absolutes. You can't never be this, or you can't never be that, or it's impossible this, or it's impossible that. Each child has different needs. If you have an only child, you might find yourself playing with them more often and being a friend or being a sibling to that child. So one might say, well, you can never be a sister to your child. It just depends on the varying needs of different teenagers out there, okay? So there are no absolutes in my book. You can, in one phase of your child's life, be a friend. In another phase, you could be a sister. In another phase, if you're a dad, you could be a brother. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what you sort of adapt yourself to be to your child, depending on what's going on. Ultimately, you are the parent. That's the way I see it. So yes, ultimately, I am a mom, but I could be different things to my children, depending on what they need. Another thing I've learned with parenting my teens is that there is a big mistake when a parent chooses to compare their childhood to their children's childhood. So say, for instance, my child's got the tap running and they're just brushing their teeth and they're waffling on and the tap's just going and the tap's just going, and I turn around the bend and I'm thinking to myself, hey, turn the tap off. Do you realize when I was your age, I used to fetch water 2 miles away from a stream and would have to walk all the way back with it on my head, and it was, so hard to come by water, and blah, 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 blah. They can't relate. They don't know what you're talking about. If you want them to relate to that, then you should have had them in that time period, in that day, and have them go fetch water from the stream to understand the value of the water. So instead of comparing their actions and things that displease you to your time, which is history to them, they don't know what you're talking about. You can find something relevant today that makes sense to them. So I know they get pocket money. I know they, have little part-time jobs here and there. And I can simply say, this is what I've learned. Can you turn the tap off? It's expensive. It's expensive. It's a waste. So I've educated them on the fact that you pay for water. And when you run the tap that way, it is a waste. It doesn't make sense that it's running that way. And then you find yourself having to be very repetitive as a teen parent. Or a parent to a teen, right? You have to be very repetitive. Is something I've learned and I hate, but I have to do it. I keep repeating myself and I keep repeating myself and I keep repeating myself, and it's the best thing that you can do. You just have to keep on re-emphasizing a point. But in terms of making reference to my past, I have found that it hasn't really worked. And I've thought it through, I've prayed about it, and it doesn't work. I've been informed it doesn't work because they don't live in that time. So I have to come along with my teen. I have to be relatable. If I continue to, refer them back to my history, it's going to do them no good. It's just me inserting myself in a situation and constantly telling them about myself, and maybe feeling resentment about how I was raised, while trying to explain that I don't want them to simply do that or simply do this, So let it go. Oh, I didn't have a room to myself, and I didn't have that, and look at you, you're privileged. Well, you set them in a position where they are privileged. They didn't choose that. You did. I found that instead of going on and saying, I didn't get to go out with my friends the way you do, it's almost as if I'm being resentful, about my upbringing. If I don't want them to go out with their friends, say for instance, this is an example, then reverse them back to your day and age and have it play out that way. What are you trying to achieve? What are you doing? So just relate with them, come along with them. I heard it said once that you can't raise your children for a time that you were in. You have to raise your children for the generation that they are in. So it then means that you get to come along. You get to see both sides of life, how it was for you, how it is for them, and you can adapt. They can't adapt and work their way backwards in time to how it was for you. There was no technology, there was no phones, mobile phones as the case may be, and so on and so forth. The idea of drumming it down their throat that it wasn't like that and it wasn't like this and I didn't have that and I didn't have this, it doesn't really help. You'll just end up in a weird sort of head-butting scenario where you're not getting through to them, and then you have your child who already is in a position where they always want to think you don't understand them. You've given them enough ammunition to say you don't understand them. You don't know what we're going through in our day and age. You don't know what it's like out there for us mom. You don't know what it's like out there for us dad. You don't want to fall into that position where suddenly they comfortably start to suggest that you don't get it, they get it, and we're separate people. You want to come along. Don't take them back to your generation. Come along with them. You are more empowered having both sides to come along with them, as opposed to forcing them to come along with you to the 1900s. Doesn't make any sense. So come along, understand it. Social media is a thing. Adapt, learn. I find that when you come along with your teen, you stay young. And when I say stay young, I'm not talking about wrinkles. That's going to come anyway. But I mean, you stay young, you stay current. You stay being that parent that they can relate to even when they leave your home. Because you get it. You're up to date. You're not dated. You're up to date. So it's important to come along with the times. If they're on social media, please be on social media. If they're on Snapchat, get a Snapchat account. If they are on Instagram, make sure you're on Instagram. If they are on Facebook, make sure you're on Facebook. Whatever it is, make sure you're on there. Stay involved. Understand the ways of the days, okay? The signs and the times. You need to stay in the loop, and you need to speak to them in the language that they understand. You are empowered to do that. It is impossible for a child to speak to you in the way or the language that you understand. That's a big reach. It's a tall order. And that's what I've learned parenting teenagers. And I'm quite thankful that I've understood this, because it's helped me let go of a few things. Yes, it is challenging when you're dealing with a teenager, and you think to yourself, well, oh, you have a better life. You have it better than we did. But you set them up to have it better than you did. You made the choice to have them in the place that you did, and to give them the things that you did. So if your child has, say, a room to themselves, an ensuite, a room with a bathroom and everything to themselves, you can't then go on and keep saying, I had to share a room. You set them up for that. If you want them to share a room, then by all means, I don't know, live in a one-bedroom house and force them all to stay together in one room, so you don't have to keep saying that to them. You did that. For you, ground zero would have been maybe a much more difficult situation or less privileged situation. But for your teenager, you have created ground zero for them from that point. So start talking to them from that point. Relate with them from that point. If you ever want to talk about your past, I find, or you want to talk about, how it was for you, then it should be in isolation of admonishing them regarding something. Just probably because you just wanted to tell them about what it was like for you, but not in reference to saying, and so you should understand XYZ. No, they don't. They just don't. The other thing I also find is that admonishing teenagers in the presence of other siblings can be very tricky. You've got to be very careful with that. You want to maintain respect among the siblings, right? So if you want to admonish, one of them for some sort of behavior that is less than, you might want to take them away to a private setting and have that conversation in such a manner that the other siblings have no idea that conversation even took place. In admonishing your child, the child still realizes that you respect them and you care about them, even though they have maybe disrespected you, as the case may be. It's something that I've learned, and it's something that I've started to take on board very quickly. Yes, my daughter is leaving in 2 months, but yes, I have implemented that for a while, where if there's an issue, I will pull her aside, but there are some issues that you won't be able to pull the child aside if it relates to another child. Then you obviously have to deal with the pair, as the case may be. It leads me on to talking about comparing children. You never compare children. You just never do that. It's a recipe for disaster and probably a topic for a whole nother day, but you just can't do that, because you will create unusual dynamics with nuances in relation to how the children will interact in the future, and just it is a path to disaster. You don't do that. I grew up in a setting where that did happen. It's not ideal, and it's a very unhealthy way to get what you want out of a child. It's manipulative as well. It spells a lot of things that are just wrong, in my opinion. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert parent of over 20 years. So what is an expert? What is an expert? So, someone says to you they're an expert, they've been 10 years in that field. Well, I've been 20 years as a wife and parent. So I can say from my experience, this is how I've gone about it. I'm happy with my kids. They haven't kept me awake at night. I haven't gotten a call in the middle of the night. And as it stands, they're already on their way out. So I have a thing or two to say. Yes. So yes, comparing them is a no, complete no. And then, as I say, you have to be respectful. Just because you're their parents, it doesn't mean that you can be very disrespectful to them. You have to remember that at the end of the day, you would go on to be less and they would go on to be more. And it's a fact. However you want to see it, that is a fact. So you've got to handle with care. You're responsible for them, and it will happen. They will be responsible for you or not, depending on this conversation that we're having. So let me know in the comments down below what your encounters have been raising teenagers. What's it been like for you? Are you raising teenagers right now? What are the dynamics that you're encountering? What are the mistakes you've made? What have you learned? This is what I've learned. But yeah, just go down below and let's carry on the conversation as I end this video and wrap it up. I will be back on talking about a lot more. And wherever you are in the world, have a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, a good night, wherever you are, as I say. And I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye.